Hello and welcome to the fifth and final session of the 2017 FBR Ops Series. Our discussion today is Bridging the Training and Support Gap. And our panel to help us wrap up the series consists of 3 franchisee training experts. We have 2 franchisors from the cleaning sector with us, Jerry Henley, the EVP of Office Pride Commercial Cleaning, and Ryan Rabideau, a franchise consultant of MadePro. And we have a well-known franchise supplier, Tortal Training's president, Cordell Riley. So I just want to thank the 3 of you for joining us today and taking some time out of your day. And to lead the discussion, I'm going to turn things over to FBR's president and COO, Michelle Rowan.
Thank you, Mike, and I am so excited. I have had the chance to be on panels or work with everybody that we're talking with today, so I'm very excited for them to share some of their experience with you guys. What I'd like to do before we start, like last time, is just give each of our panelists a chance to kind of put some context around why they're joining us today, what their system is, or what their business is that they work in, so you have some sense of where they're coming from. So Jerry, if you would like to start and just tell us a little bit about Office Pride, that would be great.
Well, great. Thanks, Michelle. Glad to be on the call here. We are in commercial cleaning. We specialize in commercial cleaning. We are celebrating our 25th year anniversary, and we're pleased to do that here in sunny Clearwater, Florida, and we're ready to start some major growth plans, and training and ops is very near and dear to our hearts right now, so excited to be able to share some of the things we'll be doing and also hear some other great ideas.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerry. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your role and about MadePro.
Okay, well, MadePro is I'd say mid-sized franchisor in the residential home cleaning industry. We have about 200 locations. We've been open for a bit over 15 years. And specifically, my role here has been the initial business coach / trainer / head of training for the past 7 years. We're a pretty lean organization. So I've really been working solo at training every franchisee and coaching them for their first 6 months to a year of running their offices, really this entire time. So, you know, we have about 200 stores, and I've probably worked with 150 or so of them.
That's great.
So that's a little bit about us. We're located here in Boston, Massachusetts.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. And Cordell, thank you for joining us again. I know we've had you on our series in the past, and I think that you have some great information to share with everyone today. And can you tell us about yourself and a little bit about Tortal as well?
Sure. And first of all, Michelle, thank you for having me and us on, and to the rest of our audience and our other panelists, I'm delighted to be here. So real quickly, I have 20-plus years in franchising, spent the first 20 years working inside for a franchise organization in various operations and ultimately training roles, so on the franchisor side. I ultimately created a training company inside of that franchise system by the name of Tortal Training, and Tortal Training is a full-service training and development firm that works with other franchise organizations that look to put in place effective training systems. So that's kind of who we are and what we do. Michelle, I do want to share with the group, and I hope I've tried to find a quiet place where I can do this. I'm actually doing this session live from ATD. ATD is Association for Talent Development. It is 10 to 12,000 people that are all in the training and development space. So it's actually ironic that we're talking on training and development. I'm at a conference with 10 to 12,000 people that do the same type of thing. So that's who we are.
Have you picked up any good nuggets yet that you're going to be able to share on the call, or is it too early in your conference?
Nope. I can certainly share some. Well, one of the first nuggets that I'll share, Michelle, is that I don't see enough franchising people here. I ran into 1 or 2. So for those of you that are not familiar with ATD, please take a look at it. It is the organization to be a part of for all things associated with training. They do have local chapters. So how's that for a first tip, Michelle?
I think that's great, and that's probably a good tip that we don't get out of our own industry enough, and there's good tips to be had from business outside of it. I will also say, too, that I know that Tortle is part of Engage Consulting now, which is also out of Massachusetts. And I will say there's not a lot of physical events that are offered for operations executives. And Evan Hackle and Engage Consulting, they do it, and I don't know if it's every year or every other year, but they do a great destination event to do some more operations training as well. So definitely worth connecting with Cordell or Engage Consulting on that, too. So before I throw the first question at you guys, I'm going to share a little bit of our historic data that we did, or that we've collected here. So in 2011, we did a survey of the franchisors and asked them the same questions that we asked their franchisees to measure the gap between how they felt they would be rated by their franchisees, or how they felt how they were doing in delivering training and support versus how the franchisees actually rated them. So what you're seeing here is the categories that roll into, or sorry, the questions that roll into our category of training and support. So on the left, training and support programs, marketing and promotional programs, effective use of technology and system-wide communications. The franchisees' responses and their ratings are in red. The franchisors' perception of the way that they were delivering or how they were meeting the needs of their franchisees is in black. So in all categories across the entire survey, the franchisors rated themselves higher in those categories. And then in all of the sections of the survey, they also rated themselves higher. The biggest gap being in marketing and promotional programs, which was also rated the lowest by franchisees. One other look at the trends in our data from the training and support from 2011 to now is that it's gone a little up and a little down, but it is the lowest scored section of our survey historically. And what we're seeing here is it hasn't even improved really in the last 6 years. So I don't know if that's it being stagnant and we're not innovating the way that we train or the way that we help our franchisees. But overall, we can see that franchisors are much more optimistic than franchisees when we look at the same questions being asked of both groups. So the idea is, why are franchisors more optimistic or feeling more positive about what's happening? And we think it starts with unrealistic expectations that franchisees have when they enter into their business. So when they have these high expectations of what you're going to do and deliver for them and it's not met, it leads to them feeling a little less optimistic about the future. So we want to start with the idea of setting expectations and preparing candidates as they come into your franchise system about how hard it actually is to run a business and what it's going to be like as they ramp up. So I'm going to start with the first question to you guys, and how do you set franchisees' expectations for training and support? And I think what we'll do to start that is, Cordell, you've given us a nice structure that you can speak to. We'll throw up your slide, and if you want to start with that, then I'll go to Jerry and Ryan and ask that same question of them within their system.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Michelle. So I guess, Michelle, I'm going to share a belief, one that, is pretty ingrained in me for a long time inside a franchise. I think a franchisor has three ultimate roles when it comes to being a franchisor. One is that they are the visionary. They're setting the path for what their system looks like, what it does, where they're trying to get to, so that they're that visionary role. I think the second key role for franchisor is being a strong marketer. So marketing to new and prospective franchisees to join the system, marketing to the ultimate, end user customer. So I think marketing. And thirdly, I think they need to be a strong training organization, because at the end of the day, you have people that are investing in a franchise for a proven system, and the way that you convey that is through an effective training program. So I think those are the three key roles of a franchisor. Certainly there are other things that a franchisor is doing, but when somebody asks me what are the three key roles, that's kind of where I start at. Michelle, thank you for putting the slide up. For many years and being inside a franchise and talking with other franchise people, one thing I would constantly get asked is, what does training look like inside of a franchise system? And that's kind of where this slide came from. I won't say that this is the end-all, be-all. There certainly might be some variations associated with it, but this is typically what we see. And, Michelle, I don't think I can point on this, but I think everybody can follow. I'm just going to kind of maybe start at the top and kind of go down from there. At the very top, when you think about what should our typical franchise training structure be, it starts from your business system. You know, one mistake that I've seen people make a lot of times is jump in and start to build training before the business system is solid, and it needs to go the other way around. You know, your business system needs to say, here's how we clean here, here's how we greet the customer here, here's how we buy product here, whatever it might be, and then you start to build training from that. So at the very top, business system, that's typically contained in the operations manual, typically contained in the operations. Charles, was getting a little bit of background noise. Is everybody hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you. I don't know if that's coming in through someone's computer perhaps.
Okay, good deal. Sorry about that. So you need to start with the business system, which is typically contained in the ops manual. And then you have typically two types of training. You know, so over here on the left, you got your initial training, which is that new onboarding training that gets that franchisee up to speed to get ready to open his or her business. So you got that. Then on the right, you got the ongoing training. Okay, and ongoing is typically conveyed in a couple different ways, typically through the field staff, and I know we're going to talk about that some, also through conferences and conventions. So you kind of got those as the major ways that you have your ongoing training delivered. Below both of those, you're going to have different what we call modes of training. And when we talk about that, and we can certainly go deeper if the call warrants here, but what we encourage people to strive for a blended solution to training in all of these various sectors, your initial and your ongoing. And that blended mode typically means instructor-led training, where you're bringing somebody into a classroom, you're going over certain things, but you also have some type of technology-enabled component, in other words, e-learning. So as an example, if I go back to the initial side over on the left for a second, one way that we see people blend both of those together is prior to having people come to their home office for whatever that initial training might be, they have them go online and take a series of online training classes that kind of gets everybody up to speed. And then when they come to the home office, they can really spend the time going through the things that do require role play and interaction. So thank you for putting this up, Michelle. I know that's kind of a quick high-level view, but again, this is typically what we see when it comes down to what training structures look like inside of franchise systems.
Perfect. So Jerry, let's start with you then. So how are you setting expectations for training and support with the candidate as they come on board? And I'd like for you to just kind of also explain what does your training look like? Is it in person? Are they with other franchisees? You know, what does that structure actually look at? And then how are you setting that expectation with them?
Well, you know, we try and set the expectation very early on in the even the sales process of franchise sales, where we do a lot like Cordell just talked about. We really, you know, we focus on our business system, but not just, you know, how we clean, how we do this, but we really break out what we call the business system wheel. It's the ops business system. We have components in there that we train to. So we really point out to say, hey, you are starting a business here. You have a lot of things to look at, and then, you know, we walk through that. One of the biggest things, and also to echo what Cordell was saying at the end of his presentation, is what we found most successful is that we initiated a 3-week what we call pre-training regimen. So before they come to corporate, we do exactly what Cordell was talking about. We go into a 3-week to get as much of the housekeeping things done. How much of this can we get them? We start off with what we call our franchise vision plan. Having them complete that, we go into financials. We go into a lot of things so that when they get here, you know, when we have them in for a week, so we go through the 3-week period and we get them acclimated as much as possible. We do have them do some online things. We have them complete as much as possible. To relieve some of the drinking from a fire hose syndrome for that week that we have them here. So then we go in for a week, and we try and keep that as high-level awareness, because we just can't expect them to learn everything in a week. And so we don't, and we get them as far as we can. We go over a lot of things that week. We have some hands-on training on some of the mechanical aspects of the business. We do a lot on financials. Just everything around unit level performance and economics, what's going to help them drive, you know, lead generation, everything. But then we split it up also. After that, we send in a trainer which is interesting too. We just started this about 8 months ago. We created a certified trainer program where we knew with our growth that we just are not going to be able to keep up with the individual needs and the overall needs of onboarding franchise and existing franchise. So we turned to our existing franchise. We created a certified trainer program, and the results have been phenomenal. The response has been phenomenal. The existing franchise that have made it doing well have signed it up, and they go through a training program. We certify them. So they go out for a week.
Wait, Jerry, I'm gonna have you hold on that because we're gonna talk about that role later. But yeah, so keep going with the 1 week in person, what you're covering there.
Yeah, so we do the 1 week of sales. So we go out and we go for sales training. It's not, we get lucky sometimes during that week and we'll actually sell something. But we go out for that week of in-market sales training, and then we wait a period and then continue our coaching and bringing them along, and then we wrap up the formal cycle with an operations training in market as well. So, we try and spread that out as much as possible to match real time, and all the time blending it. As Cordell says, we got in person, we got online, we just run the whole gamut, and we like to be able to personalize it as much as we possibly can to the individual.
And any measurement of their feedback through this process, how are you measuring if they're feeling overwhelmed by the speed or the amount of data being driven to them, or is that just more you're feeling that out personally?
No, we have, we do have area developers that we utilize in some of our markets, and primarily we do our direct market, what we call direct market. And if it's direct market, they're assigned a business coach that works with them on a weekly basis. So we measure that with them emotionally and practically on a weekly basis, both with our business coach, whether it's direct or an area developer.
Okay. And then I want to ask Ryan if you can address this as well. And I also know that you're really in charge of this training piece. So if you started with a different approach to it and it's changed, you could also speak to that if you'd like.
Sure, absolutely. So here at MaPro, the training structure is pretty similar to what has already been discussed. Franchisees sign up, and then of course they're going to start working on setting up all the practical measures for the business, which we're guiding them on. That process usually takes 2 to 3 months. Finding an office, getting all your vendors set up, etc. They're really focused on that, and of course doing some online training in the interim. And I have to say, when I first started, I really tried focusing on evening out the training and trying to get people to really comprehend a little bit of everything about the business model right from the beginning all the way to the end of that 3-month period, which caps off with coming in person and having a week of on-site in-person training, and then going off and opening your business. One thing that I definitely learned throughout the years is that, frankly, training people on something they're not going to use for 3 months and live and breathe every day is not highly productive. So now I have to say we've kind of divided the training a bit more. Now, it's still not a good idea to have people drink from a fire hose that 1 week, obviously, but I do have them focus for really the first month just on their practical matters. Take a load off. Don't overthink it. Don't try to rush into knowing everything from the beginning, because frankly, they need to know this information when they've got some of that past them and they can relax a little bit more, focus on the learning specifically. So it's almost like, in a really practical sense, I used to have one giant checklist.
Ryan, I think we lost your audio. So while we try and get Ryan back on the call, I'm not sure what happened there. I would like to ask.
Go out and do it, and I have what you need to learn, and that second checklist. Michelle?
Yeah. So Ryan, you're cutting in and out. So I just wanted to. We got to the part of you saying you used to have a full checklist that you ran through.
Right. So I used to have one checklist of everything you need to do and everything you need to learn, and it was a little too overwhelming. What I adjusted it to Matters of setting up your business, and the other being on the concepts of what you need to learn. And then that second checklist can actually kick in a little bit closer to when you're more relaxed, you've done the more practical aspects, those have finished up, and you've got more time to focus on properly learning. And that's sooner to when you will actually run your business and therefore apply what you've learned.
Okay, so you're kind of setting the expectation up front that you're going to be overwhelmed, and that we're kind of giving it to you now, but it'll really stick when you're actually applying this to your business.
Yeah, somewhat. And
okay.
The other thing I'll note is that with expectation setting, I think it's really important that someone in operations is doing that even before the sale is made. I'm actually probably the third phone call someone has with being interested in Maypro. They'll talk to a sales rep a couple of times who's guiding them through the process, and then they'll talk to me so that I can thoroughly answer questions about how the operation works and what the expectation should be for getting set up and training. So I think just as much as what you say is who is saying it. I think it matters that they talk to someone who they know they're going to be talking to and relying on for support as soon as they hit the ground.
That's a good point. So they know that you're accessible. They have a name. Good.
Exactly.
Cordell, do you have anything that you want to add as far as how you set franchisee expectations for training and support, or do you have any info you can share of what you're seeing as far as that, the amount of initial training, what that time frame is that you're seeing with the majority of your clients?
Yeah, Michelle, thank you for that. Now I'll do this, and I'll do it real quickly as I was listening to Jerry and Ryan go through this. I'm going to share one tip to the audience that I hope they will find helpful. I've seen it work very successfully when I was on the franchisor side and other franchisors. That one tip is write training into your vision statement. Write that you are going to be a strong training organization. That's how you're going to meet your corporate goals into your vision statement. We as a franchisor, when I was on that side, we had a corporate goal that we wanted to deliver 40,000 man-hours of training throughout our system. We kind of looked at how many locations, how many technicians, how much training they needed on an ongoing basis, and internally we had a goal that we were holding people accountable for. But having it in your vision statement sets the mindset corporately for your people in the field that are delivering it, but also when you're talking with new and prospective franchisees and they're hearing about your mission and vision and how you're going to grow the franchise system, how you're going to help support them, they see training in there. So one small tip, write it into your mission and vision statement. That helps to set that expectation up front, internally and externally with the franchisees.
Good. And anything on as far as the length of time? It sounded like we have about a 2, 3, 4 week amount of initial training between in-person and kind of prep work ahead of time?
Yeah, it varies, Michelle. Certainly that 10-day window is kind of what we see as I would say the average max across most of the systems that we work with. So a week to 10 days is kind of what we see as that window. But the big caveat on this, I know we're going to talk about this later, don't let time be the factor. Time should not be the factor. What you're trying to teach them should be the factor, and then the time works out to be whatever it works out to be. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but time should not be the driver, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, good. So while I'd like to just poll the audience, everyone that's on, to find out what does your initial training look like, just so we can share that with everybody that's on here. And while we answer that, and we'll share the results when that's done, what's the biggest challenge that you guys have with training? So Ryan, I think I'll start with you, and just kind of, what's the biggest thing that keeps you up at night when you think about training?
Oh, what keeps me up at night? Oh, that's a tough one. I think what keeps me up at night is that I will completely fail, they will learn nothing, their business will fail, and they'll go home broke.
That's a big one to keep you up at night.
Yeah, but in terms of what I think is the biggest challenge for training, I think it's twofold. Number one is definitely identifying the type of learner, the type of student you have, so to speak. People don't all learn the same way. So I think personalization and personalizing this process to the individual is really key to getting through to them and helping them learn these different tasks and skills as quickly as humanly possible. I don't think there really is a one-size-fits-all lesson plan. So I think personalization is big, and therefore identifying who you're working with and what type of person they are is a big part of this process and being successful at it. So at Maypro, as part of our process, we actually have people you use and fill out a couple of behavioral assessments and sort of personality assessments to help give me a leg up on understanding what type of learner they might be and what type of operator they're going to be. So that's one challenge, is identify your audience. You're not going to be successful teaching someone by just talking at them if they're not cued in by audio. If they're really much more visual, you need more visuals. So personalizing your process. And the second big challenge for training, and in general also support, is more so on the franchisor side, keeping everyone on the same page. There are a lot of moving pieces and gears to setting up a new franchisee, from their website to their physical office to everything else. There's a lot of different support staff. Most organizations need to have at least 4 different roles probably for just support easily. We're the same way. We've got 5 or 6 different people who are really key for supporting any franchisee. Keeping everyone on the same page about what's going on in the process is really a challenge at times. So for example, today we had a all support meeting, which is about half our company getting together at the same time in the same place and making sure that any issues with support are being addressed right away, and in front of everyone who could possibly be touching support. Activities like that can be difficult to arrange, but they're crucial for keeping everyone on the same page. So communication and being everyone on the support side being on the same page, and then customizing your approach and understanding who you are teaching. Those are the 2 big challenges that I face.
Okay, great. Jerry, how about you? What do you find to be the biggest challenges that you're facing?
Somewhat like what Ryan said. I think, we've been really focused on the vision plan, and, when we start them out, is to make sure it's being on the same page. It's, everybody on that same page, but we want to make sure, that we're not stalling out, they're not stalling out. But it's, how to artfully hold them accountable to their goals and vision. So we start with a vision plan. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do with this? How are we going to get there? And we define all that, and then just tracking that and keeping that on track. But I think keeping them engaged in that same sheet of music, giving them visibility of where they're at in their training and in their progress, because training evolves to coaching with us. Training is one time. Training is training to me, and then there's the ongoing reinforce of coaching. So it's that keeping them visible, keeping them tied to that vision plan of why they got into this first place, where they're doing, and when it gets tough, how to get there and get out of it, stay out of what we call the grind. But, I think, the biggest challenge, I think, is keeping people engaged in that original plan and that original vision, and adjusting as they grow through growth and not stalling out.
Good. That's a good point. And I will say, we did a vision planning session in last year's op series, and we created a vision planning workbook. So if you guys aren't doing that with your franchisees, it's a free resource on our site, and something that can help you kind of get that instilled with your franchisees and have them be part of holding themselves accountable to that end point that they want to get to with their business. Cordell, how about you? What are you seeing people have the biggest challenges with when it comes to training their franchisees?
Yeah, Michelle, it's a great question. I'm going to take just a little bit of a creative liberty with it, if you wouldn't mind. I'm going to change the word challenge to opportunity, because I think that's obviously how you got to look at challenges, of what are the opportunities. And the single biggest one out there, and it's a simple one, but people don't always think about it when it comes to training, and that opportunity is aligning training with business goals. Opportunity being aligning training with business goals. Slowly, I shouldn't say, no, I will say slowly going away are the days of just training for the sake of training and checking the box. And we certainly notice some of those check-the-box types of things live and reside out there, and you have to do it. But training should really, really be looked at inside of your system as one of the ways that we're going to get to the goals that we're talking about as an organization. Is it same-store sales growth? Is it net promoter score increase that we're trying to do? Is it warranty reduction? Whatever it is, what are your key goals that you're looking to do that year inside of your franchise system? And ask the question, how can training have an impact? And note I said how can, and if training can have an impact, because training is not always the answer. So I'm going to say that big opportunity, Michelle, is aligning training with business and organizational goals. It's one of the biggest things that I'm seeing more and more franchisees grasp and start to really think about as we're putting training in place.
Well, and I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people are more sensitive to calling meetings. I know that a lot of companies used to be very meeting heavy. And I think that through reading business books and understanding that, making sure that there's a point to that meeting and not just getting together weekly because it's on your calendar or taking an hour and a half when it really can be done in 20 minutes. So I think that applies to what you're saying in that don't just train to train. What's the action you're hoping will come from that training or that education? So that's great. So the majority of people that answer, yeah.
Let me just add one more piece to that. So maybe even take it a step, a little more broader than that. So when the franchise system sits down at the end of, whenever they're getting ready to do their planning for the next year, and they say we're looking for this type of same-store sales growth, we're looking for this net promoter score, how does training fit into those, and what do we need to be training our front line on so we get that same-store sales increase? What do we need to be training people on so we get that net promoter score increase? So thinking about those real big-picture corporate goals and how can training have an impact, if it can have an impact on those.
Great. Yeah, and if you guys, the people that are attending the webinar, if you have specific challenges that you would like to get feedback on, you can also put those into your questions, and we'll try and get to those as well. But that's great. What I want to talk about, Cordell talked about the blended in-person versus online training. I think that we heard that both are happening with Ryan and Jerry and their organizations. So we can actually ask again, from the first poll, I will say, I meant to say that, about 75% of people are within that 2 to 4 weeks between those two buckets. And then 25% were between 5 and more than 8 weeks. So it's kind of in line with what we were talking about before. But we'll ask everybody that's attending now to tell us how much training do you do, what is your blend, what is the breakout of what's in person versus online. But Cordell, I'm going to start with you as far as you said it's important to see that blended type of both and offer both. So what are you seeing as far as a good breakdown between in-person and online to be the most effective?
Yeah, Michelle, again, I will go back to what are you trying to teach and what's going to be the most effective way to do it. That should really kind of lead, is it in person or is it online, or is it something we're going to blend? So if I'm going to do a sales training class where I need to do role play and things of that nature, that might be something very, very appropriate for a truly blended solution where, okay, we can cover some of the baseline features and benefits, but now let's come together and let's do some type of role play scenario where we actually get both of those together. If I'm just trying to convince or convey just new features and features of a new product or service that we're rolling out, may be very, very appropriate for just having an online component standalone piece. What do we see in the industry, Michelle, and groups? As I'm talking about this, again, I am talking very, very global. I don't have this for just franchise systems, but from a global perspective, and actually ATD is where I'm getting it from, it's a 70-30 mix. 70% of the training that's done today is still done in a classroom live format. You got about 30% of that obviously supported with some type of technology. So about 70-30 mix is what I'm seeing. And that is shifting and growing where more and more things are moving to that technology component. But today about 70-30 is kind of what we see out there in the marketplace.
Okay. And Ryan, I'm going to start with you because you had mentioned it's important to understand the person that you're training, what works for them. Do you adjust your in-person versus online based on that knowledge that you gather from them?
Yes, absolutely. To a certain extent, everyone's going to do a certain amount of online training as well as like online pre-training assessments and post-training assessments. That being said, I have definitely found that certain franchisees, certain people really, really struggle with the online approach, especially if that online approach is not personal at all. So when I say online training, I'm also including things like having screen share sessions and having a conference call with them one-on-one and coaching them through certain topics. So for some people, they'll get a lot more of that personalized attention, whereas other people I know can really just, here you go, here's the manual, for lack of a better word, read this, and this, and go forward and take this assessment, and they're fine with that. So yeah, absolutely. For some people, it's going to be 70-30. Other people, it's going to be 50-50. A few people, it's going to be 90-10, maybe. That's pretty rare, but it comes up sometimes.
Sure, and just really quickly, you had said that after these training assessments you're doing, are you assessing their retention or their knowledge of the piece you're training them on, or are you assessing their satisfaction or their feeling on the value of the training they're receiving? What is that assessment that you're doing?
The assessment's going to be on their retention and comprehension first and foremost. We do survey, I should say, I suppose, for satisfaction later in the process, but that will typically be throughout the week-long in-person training. It'll be at the end of the process. We'll assess that.
Okay.
Right now, I don't have an ongoing satisfaction, which is kind of something I'm planning on trying soon, actually. But yeah, right now.
Okay. So post initial training, you're kind of getting that feedback on it.
Yep.
Okay. So Jerry, what do you find is working between that in-person and online training to be the most effective for you guys, or how are you measuring that that part with your existing franchisees that are going through it?
Well, we kind of divide it up into two parts. I would say that, a latter part is the more mechanical, how we do what we do kind of training and online libraries and tutorials. We're just getting ready to hire a specific person to really beef that up. So that's post training. That's our reinforcement. I agree with what Ryan said. When we come into this, we personalize it more. That's why we found the most effective way is to have the resources available to them online for reference for a lot of that. But we spend so much time with them on an individual basis, as much as we can one-on-one, to coach them through the different components of our training with the reference for backup. So I agree with Ryan. It ebbs and flows. I mean, we have some people that pick things up and go real fast, and boom, they can retain it right away. As far as measurement of it, again, we are so tied to them throughout the launch. For the first 6 to 7 months of their business launch, we get a pretty good weekly. We're with them weekly, so we know that, and we adjust accordingly.
Great. So one of the opportunities or the challenges that you guys did not bring up, but I've heard from a lot of the franchisors that I work with, is one of their challenges is getting franchisees to that ops manual or to that online training module or portal to get the great content that you guys have available to them. Cordell, do you have any best practices that you give to people as far as how do you get them more engaged with the training that you're offering?
Yeah, great question, Michelle. So several things. First of all, it needs to be relevant to the person and what their job is or their role of what they're trying to do. So when they go into an LMS, if you have an LMS, learning management system, that needs to say that, okay, you're this role. You are a cleaning person inside of this organization, cleaning person inside of Maypro. So when you come in, here's your curriculum that you need to go to. It's going to help you do your job better right now, because one of the fundamental adult learning principles is the law of relevancy. Adults need things that are relevant to them right now to do their job. So it needs to be customized to that person. You need to have specific goals that you're going to be talking about as an organization. This is what you need to have as an ongoing training perspective in order to do your job effectively. Rewards. We've seen other franchisors reward people for the amount of training that they do. So look at who took the most training, and when you're having your annual convention, have an award that ties in people that took the most training and talk about that. So you're making a big deal about it. Write it up in your newsletters that you're putting out online in your intranet. Who were your top graduates? Who took the most training inside of your system? Small things, but people like to see their names on those types of lists. So those are just a few things that I've seen work very, very successfully to pull people into the training. But certainly the biggest thing it needs to be relevant, and it needs to help them do their job better when they go out and take it.
Right. It's got to be worth their time to leave their business.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. So, Jerry, do you want to add anything as well? I don't know. I just kind of threw that in there because we didn't talk about it with the challenge, and I do know that's one that comes up. But
yeah,
if you,
I still think, I like when you threw engagement in there too, and I know Evan's big, certainly on that, and it's like, how do you keep them engaged? And I think that's got to be the focus, and I agree with Cordell, it's got to be relevant to where they're at the time, and it can't be just a blanket library. It's got to be relevant, and I'll go back to that one-on-one walk. We got to know what's relevant to them and be able to guide them and where they're struggling and where they could be struggling. So I guess that's all I'd have to add to it.
Great.
Yeah, Michelle, if I can just add on to that, I mean, if you just think about that logically for a second, for the most part, we're training adults. I know that in some franchise systems we have a younger generation, a millennial generation, but you really think about when people come to work, they're coming to work to do a job, not necessarily to learn. That may sound somewhat negative, but they're not. They're coming to do a job. So how can this training going into this LMS help me do my job better? So if you think through those lenses, that'll kind of lead a lot of the things that you're making sure that you focus on.
That's great. And I do believe, Cordell, that the millennial generation, they're still considered adults. So that's still adult training.
Thank you for that clarification, Michelle.
So in the first session of the series, we talked about the role of the field rep, and we talked a lot about how they support the franchisees, and I think that there's definitely some training that goes along with that support that they're doing in the field. So I want to ask you guys, how does your corporate team complement that role of the person that's kind of in the face of the franchisee or identifies those opportunities to reinforce training or get additional training to them? Is the corporate team helping that field rep? Are they dealing directly with the franchisee? I just want to kind of understand how the field reps and your trainers, and Ryan, I know in your case it's one and the same person, how do you fill in holes? How do you guys talk to each other and make sure that you're supporting and training the franchisee as needed? Ryan, if you want to start, since that's kind of both you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, honestly, Maypro doesn't have a big structure around field training right now. Unfortunately, it's something we've started getting into more of this year. We're having sort of a mandate for our business coaches to visit their offices each year out in the field. So it's kind of percolating right now. But that being said, we don't do a ton of on-site visits previously. So it's kind of a new thing for us in a lot of ways. We offer constant training available through our business coaches or myself through online means and conference calls and tutorials and things like that. But on-site visits were fairly rare until the past year. So it's kind of still developing for us. That being said,
okay.
It's not really like we have two teams. It's not like, oh, how does the field trainer really coordinate with the business coach? Because, yeah, those are one and the same at the moment.
Okay. And I know Jerry had talked about that their initial training focuses on actual business training in addition to coming into the franchise system and Office Pride specific. Are you guys offering any of that business acumen skills training as well to your franchisees? Ryan, I don't know if your audio is cutting out. Okay, so Jerry, I'm going to go to you then as far as the corporate team and the support of training versus the field rep question, if you can.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, what's been very successful for us, and as fast as we're growing, there was no way we could get enough field reps out there effectively, and so we turned to this certified trainer program. And it's been really successful for us. We put it out there. We thought we'd have trouble getting people to sign up, and the existing franchises that have made it, that are doing well, just came to us, and we have a lot now that go out in the field. We also have our area developers. What I'll say is that the big thing is how we measure what we're doing out there with them. And again, I'm going to take it back to engagement and to having to find our office pride business system, to where we have the vision plan, we have our fast track financials, we have, lead generation, sales, and ops, and all that. But we have a 5-point measurement system of their engagement, and we track that with our legacy franchises, with our new franchises, everybody, and it gets us a score that we measure. So each one of those 5 categories is a 20% factor, and if they're doing all, then we know that they're 100%. We know they're getting great support and they're great engagement. So we split it up. The certified trainers have been really great for us. They give us all the reports back. The area developers do. We do monthly reports back from the field, and then we, as much as we can, measure the results in meaningful ways. So we're just not, they're getting support. We see them all the time. What are they getting out of the training? What progress are they making? And we break it down to those 5 components and have those measured. And by the way, those are, all tied. All that is tied to my directors of ops staff. That is tied to our FBR scores and what we measure and how we're going to improve those. So we're breaking down a lot of our training sections on our FBR surveys and moving the needles as much as we can through that support process. So again, I think measurement is a very key element. To once whatever you're doing is measure, and then measure some more.
Okay, so you're kind of blending some of our upcoming topics, and I'm going to jump around because I want to dig into this, the certified trainer program. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. So we talked about how can you leverage other franchisees to help bridge that training and support gap. So we can talk about different ways to do that, but that's where you've really filled in with this certified trainer program. So if you want to just kind of take people through it. So it's your existing franchisees that are going through this program. Is that correct?
Yes, and they come in for certified training, so they come in-house to our training center, and they go through this, and that's, we want everybody training the same way to the same sheet of music, and we do that. We do compensate them for their time out on the field on a per diem basis, plus all their travel expense, and so they're on call for us. And what we're finding is, the franchisees are going to listen to a fellow franchisee a whole lot better than us sometimes. I learned that with my kids. I could tell my son many times this is a great way to do it, and would never listen, and I'd pay somebody to tell him, and that's a great idea. But I think, hearing that from someone has been that they can associate with and really relate to really means a lot. Oh my gosh, just from our college time, we had a franchisee had a quadruple bypass, and his business was growing like leaps and bounds, and his wife couldn't be there, and we put out the call, and we had a core certified trainers there that basically ran their business for 4 weeks. So we have them, some specialize in sales, some specialize in ops, some are good at both, but it just really surprised me even on how successful the program has become, and people are kind of like, hey, I want to be a certified trainer.
So that's just going to ask, are you tapping people to do this, or you're saying you're really good in this one aspect of our business, would you like to do this, or you're getting people to come forth, or it's both?
A combination of both. We have a core right now of, I think, 18, certified trainers. So they fulfill both roles. They go for reinforcement training on existing, and they go to our in-field on new franchise startups. So as the word grows, we get people now that are saying, hey, I think I'm interested in that. Could I do that too? So it's almost a way, it's a way that they can give back and pay it forward. Hey, I made it through, and I know what they're going to be going through. I want to help. So,
that's great.
And they do get paid. We pay them. I'm quoting out of my league here, but I think we pay them $300 a day per diem for their to do the training, and then plus their expenses. So but a lot of times they work a lot of hours. They get out there. And what's really been the surprise to me, and I'm trying to get my hands around this, is the relationship that continues. So they almost become a mentor, and so, you know, and it's not begrudging. So especially, you know, the franchisees that they're helping kind of teams up with them. I've kind of caught me by surprise on that one. I got to kind of formalize a program for that, but it's just really, really done well for us.
Okay, so I was going to ask about mentorship. So Ryan, I'll hop to you as far as, are you leveraging franchisees to bridge that training and support gap? Do you have mentorships or any other ways that you're connecting your franchisees to answer those training needs or questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've rolled out is what we call our peer performance groups. And each peer performance group has a leader. These are all franchisees. And part of it is definitely about franchisees of a given region getting together every so often and making certain conference calls to discuss issues that affect all of them. But then through the PPG leaders, we're arranging for them and the rest of the group to kind of share the burden of mentorship for anyone new coming into that group. So that's how we're leveraging them, connecting them with their fellow franchisees early on in the process, and making sure that they start forming those critical relationships that are going to help them learn from everyone else. So it's kind of it takes a village to raise someone approach. It's not a one singular specific mentor right now, but there is a specific peer leader who's helping coordinate them with their other franchisees.
Yeah, it's really great. And Jerry, I just went back and did the math on the $300 a day. So, I mean, you would spend more than that on a trainer that you're putting out in the field when you think about having an employee and all the taxes and other money that goes to it and benefits. So that's amazing that that those franchisees are stepping up to do it. And you're also creating more engagement, that they're more committed to this brand and to either your struggling franchisees or your new franchisees, whichever camp they fall in, that they're actually stepping into their business to help. So that's great.
Yeah,
Cordell,
I like to call it variable overhead.
Yeah. Cordell, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add as far as leveraging franchisees. I don't know if you're seeing any impact of the number of candidates that turn into franchisees together. Is there something to that support structure of not having one person go through the training on their own and creating that, or anything else that you want to add before we move to the next one?
Yeah, Michelle, thank you. The only thing I was going to add is just piggyback on what Ryan touched on with the franchisee peer groups. That is something that as we are continue to be in the franchise marketplace, we're seeing that grow and develop, where more franchisors are stepping up and actually initiating it. Now, obviously, they're franchisee peer groups, but the franchisor is endorsing and saying this is a great way for you to continue your learning. The official name for it from a learning space is called crowd learning. Essentially, it's interacting and learning from others. But we're seeing that take place in more terms of franchisee peer groups throughout the marketplace. So something great to consider. And Ryan, thanks for bringing it up. Great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, I've seen peer groups that work really well, and I've seen them that kind of flounder. So if you've tried these in your system before and they haven't really stuck, I think it is important that you have a facilitator in a lot of cases, and that can be someone from corporate, that can be an outside company that helps you do that, to really get them established, to create that accountability between the franchisees. So I always, when I talk to people, if they say they've done it before, it didn't work, you couldn't get people into it, I would say don't give up on the idea completely. I think that there's different, they look different in different structures or in different brands, but they really can be very powerful for the franchisees and for just helping to alleviate some of the support that your corporate team is giving to all the franchisees. So I want to ask about technology. We've talked a little bit about the online versus the in-person, but what other technologies are you using for training? And that can be, the accountability piece, the measurement piece, the delivery of the training, whatever you want, where you want to go with this. So, Jerry, I'll go back to you to start.
Like I said, we always want to try and stay on the forefront of technology, and I think it's just business intelligence. How do you gather and measure and get the data? So we're always struggling with that to stay on top of it. So, you know, I think we're always going to be behind the technology curve where we want to be. So I don't have anything special that I can throw into the pie on there other than we're really continuing to focus. And like I said, we're getting ready to hire a dedicated person for that to give us the bandwidth that we need.
So you're not delivering training online through a custom platform or an external one?
We have our existing one through our Fran Connect platform. And then we're fortunate that on our vendor side, they have supported us with just incredibly excellent training materials for the customer experience, you know, for the actual mechanical things of what we do. So they supply us a lot of that, and it's really good. It's you know, we do a lot of OSHA training that we have to have you know, so we're fortunate we have a lot of that on that side.
Great. Ryan, how about you guys? Any additional ideas or thoughts you have on technology? You've talked a little bit about that.
Well, we invest pretty heavily in our custom CRM system for our franchisees. So whenever something technology comes up, it's pretty easy for us to roll out because we have the infrastructure to build out a lot of tools for ourselves. Or in other cases, you know, past couple of years, we rolled out an LMS system for training our endpoint employees, house cleaners. And that's been, you know, we bought into an LMS system, but we made sure it was one that we could then kind of open up and integrate into our customer management system. So there's full integration. So, you know, if I need to, I can open up an office's data and look at, oh, wow, 90% of your potential employees are passing their quizzes with a score of 82 in the first, you know, 3 months of you opening. That's fantastic. Good job, etc. So I'm pretty fortunate in that I get a high level of integration and business intelligence from that. And it's because a big part of us as a franchisor is about producing the technology to support our business. So we have a lot of in-house developers. So I'm pretty lucky in that regard. Otherwise, I'm using a suite of pretty, you know, standard tools: GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, JoinMe. Been using Zoom lately, as well as, you know, pretty standard Office products.
Michelle, I'm not sure if you are on mute. I think
I am on mute. Thanks, Mike.
Oh,
I was going to say,
I
I think it's great to use technology, just what you were talking about with the online platforms like webinars and the GoToMeetings, to be face-to-face with people when you can't physically be with them all the time, to just understand if they're digesting what you're trying to show them or explain to them. And it's really become inexpensive to do that over the last 10 or so years. I know it used to be costly to try and get in front of people through technology. Cordell, do you want to speak a little bit about what the technology is behind Tortle or how it works?
Yeah, you know, Michelle, and thank you for that. And probably the biggest thing I'll say to it, and I'll just piggyback on what Ryan said, typically what we see in this space, I am talking specifically franchising, that more and more people are moving to an LMS, which stands for Learning Management System. That obviously is the technology, the platform that allows you to deliver training, track training, set up that role-based curriculum. For the most part, I know we've talked about it from an e-learning perspective, but a good LMS should also allow you to track your, you know, face-to-face or your instructor-led training. So if you're going to do a class in a city, you should be able to do a roster, track the attendance of who did it. So we've mentioned the virtual training sessions using a GoToMeeting or Zoom or something of that nature. Your LMS should allow you to register and deploy that as well. So typically, the LMS is probably the biggest thing that we see in this marketplace. The only caveat or add-on that I'll add to this, Michelle, for the group here is training should lead, technology should not lead. It should be led by training versus technology. And what do I mean by that? Technology should enable what you're trying to do from a learning perspective. It should not be that you got this new tool, this new shiny penny. Here at the ATB conference, our VP of Learning just did a session the other day, talked about mobile technology being the latest and new penny that people are hearing about. And many times you hear these buzzwords and say, okay, yeah, we want to go out and do that. You know, and certainly those things are great if there's a business case to support that inside of your organization. So Just think about leading with training, and the technology should be able to support and deliver and not get in the way of it. Are the only add-ons that I would put on with that.
Great. Yeah, so I think you can get started with very low-cost entry technology to help support training, and then if you're looking to spend a lot of money on bells and whistles, I'm sure that there are plenty of LMS systems out there that can help you do that. So that's great. So let's talk about the way that you train single versus multi-unit franchises. I think that in the past 5 to 10 years, we've seen franchisors really targeting multi-unit franchisees. They say, this is the way that we want to grow our model because we support less people. They're opening up more stores or units. We have some data that we're going to share that show that single unit owners rank the training and support, the categories that you see here, higher than multi-unit owners across the board. So ongoing training and support, marketing and promotional programs, effective use of technology, system-wide communications, and category average, you can see on the right, shows that there's about a 7% difference between how multi-unit owners are rating it compared to single-unit owners. So I think this is something to keep in mind because I think the needs are different for the different type of owner that is either operating their business versus managing people to operate that business. So I want to understand if you guys, do your programs differ? Do you support your multi-unit versus your single-unit franchisees differently? And Ryan, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, I think one of the most important things is to realize that it's too tempting with a multi-unit situation to decide that, okay, you as the owner only need to be trained on this, this, and this, and your employee, your office manager, et cetera, or whoever else is going to be involved, depending on your system, only needs to be trained on these things here. It's a natural assumption that because the owner isn't necessarily going to be doing everything, they're going to have multiple units and additional managers and additional help, that they don't need to know every component of their company. And that, I think, is a flaw, because at the end of the day, any strong owner needs to be able to understand every component of their company. So part of it's resisting the temptation to make your job easy. You still need to train the owner just as you would a single unit operator in every aspect of the business, and do so preferably simultaneously with their other staff so that everyone on their end is going to be on the same page. So that's, in some ways, I think it's been interesting working with multi-units, because I've found that the challenge is, how do I make sure to convey all the same information but make sure it's communicated to everyone at once, as well as people knowing their defined roles, their specialties specifically, and how to branch off from that when appropriate. But the key piece has been the owner of multiple units still needs to know how to singly operate a single unit if need be, because there are a lot of unknowns when starting any business, and they need to know from the ground up. I think if you specialize a little too much there, you're taking some risks.
That's great. And Jerry, you said with the role that you have of your franchisees doing the corporate trainers, that it's important for you that everyone is delivering the same training in the same way. So does that hold true for your multi-unit versus single unit?
I'm not going to be able to contribute to that very much, because we don't really do multi-unit. Our system's not geared to that. So,
okay, it's an operator model.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cordell, are you seeing any differences that are being set up for multi-unit owners versus single unit, or really it's irrelevant from the delivery of the training?
No, Michelle, we are seeing differences, and I'll go back to my days on the franchisor side. We actually had a separate curriculum for multi-unit operators. So to Ryan's point, they still went through the baseline of how to run that one location, the ins and outs of that, so they got that. But there was also a special multi-unit curriculum that we taught for them as well, and I'll give you some of the titles that were in it. So how to conduct effective visits, so as they're going around and visiting their multiple locations, what are they doing? What are they talking with the team about? What type of communication plan are they going to have in place? How they're going to communicate with their managers? How often are they going to have meetings? So what the communication look like? Marketing. So now as they have more locations, obviously a lot of marketing is done nationally from the franchisor perspective, but what are they doing locally, and how are they combining their forces throughout their multiple locations from a marketing perspective? HR certainly gets to be a lot bigger. So now as they have more people, that they're managing. So what are the HR things that they need to be doing? So different curriculum, and those are some of the titles that we kind of had in that multi-unit curriculum.
Great, and I'm going to just jump on that, Cordell, because we did a session with some lawyers in this series, and when we polled the audience here, about 2/3 of you said that you're pulling back on training based on the what impact joint employer is having. So they're pulling back that, and the way that you just really phrased that was more of you're kind of setting up them for success and how they're managing their people versus delivering that training directly to their employees, which I like the way that you did that. So I want to ask you guys, how does that impact how you're training the franchisees or any employee training manuals and involvement that you guys have? Ryan, I know that I don't know if you can speak to this or not, or what kind of directive you're given. I know that Jerry, you had a story about the HR provider, if you want to share it here, how you're utilizing them for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, we all went through this as franchisors, and, we have a huge labor force out there. Is a huge concern to us. So we did our due diligence on that, but what was interesting came out of that was our insurance carrier was a very large agency, brought us this platform called Think HR, and actually, we first started kind of look at it as a defensive position to help separate us from some of those NLRB issues, but it turned out to be a very big positive for us. So, there was no way we could support on a state level and even municipal level all the issues and HR and things, but this vendor just is amazing. They're all certified HR people. Their answers are discoverable. So, we've separated that, and that took a lot off of our plate on our engagement. But we made the decision with that corporately that we were going to, anything to do with the customer experience, we're going to train to. And, I think that's allowable. And so, we're training we're training our franchise owner and 2 management levels down, and then we're training completely to the customer experience. So, but that whole HR module, there's a couple of them out there, but Think HR is incredible for what it does, and it does the employee handbooks, it does a lot of the HR things that I think is where you kind of can start crossing the line on getting involved, and that got us out of that quite rapidly. But we are still training to our customer experience and a couple of levels down past the franchise owner.
Okay, and can your franchisees access that HR provider directly, or is everything done through you, or do they have to do that directly through them?
They do it directly through them. Each of our franchise owners have their own login, and they have 24/7 access. The module has live people for like 12 hours through the day. And but then they also have email that you can email, and answers are guaranteed within 24 hours. So, it's a pretty robust program.
So, Ryan, how about, has it changed the way that you train with your franchisees, or any direction you give them with their employees thinking about NLRB?
It has a bit. Thankfully, I've been pretty fortunate that we've always really pushed people to use different HR resources rather than rely on the franchisor specifically for, say, any answer that maybe is best served by someone who is HR certified, for example. So I think in some ways I haven't had to adapt things because we were ahead of the game, luckily, which has been nice. But on the other hand, it's awfully tempting to pull back a bit on training, especially for the employee topic. That being said, it's such an important topic. It's the #1 topic we have with franchisees. So there's this difficult dichotomy going on. And I think really how I've adjusted is, look, you don't need to get that specific about specific policies and specific ideas if you do a really good job teaching on leadership. Because ultimately, working with employees, managing employees is about having leadership, having a vision tying your business to that vision and applying that throughout. So I think you can kind of sidestep the issue if you have really good high-level talk about the concepts of your business, your vision, and leadership skills specifically. And then that will naturally roll down to good, solid policy. I also think it's important to remember that, obviously this has been really kickstarted by the NLRB sort of cases recently, and those cases are in response to franchisees and possibly franchisors violating labor law. So double down on making sure your franchisees understand how serious proper policy and proper labor law is, and you avoid that too. So I think that's part that people haven't been talking about.
That's a great point.
How do I avoid this problem by avoiding, to a certain extent, responsibility? And how do I make sure that, we maintain the proper professional divide between franchisor and franchisee? That's good. That's very important. But it's also important to recognize that a lot of this comes from people not having the right guidance or, frankly, spitting in the face of the good guidance and doing the wrong thing. Proper leadership from the top will avoid that.
That's great. Good point, Ryan. Cordell, how about you? Do you want to share anything on how your clients are changing the way that they train, or are they changing any delivery of training or what they're training on to below the franchisee?
Yeah, Michelle, this is one I have a pretty strong opinion about, and I'll probably speak from my opinion, and certainly this is validated by some of the things that we're seeing in the marketplace with what our clients are doing. I have a saying that I really believe in, and I think Jerry touched on this some, is that your front line is your bottom line. Your front line is your bottom line. So who is the person out cleaning the homes, selling the product to the customer behind the counter? That's your brand, and that's what the customer ultimately sees, and that person needs to know how to effectively deliver your system. So I absolutely think that the franchisor has a role in getting training to the front line. I'm certainly familiar with everything going on with NLRB and all of that discussion. I absolutely know that and hear that. And certainly I encourage people to talk with their internal counsel, the counsel that they use to support their system. But the way that I talked to several franchise attorneys that I have tremendous respect for, and they've given me two things that kind of goes along with how the franchisor can do this in the right way. First of all, make sure they're delivering training that supports the brand standards. This is how we do it here. This is how we make the products, how we greet the customers, how we clean the home. Deliver training that supports the brand standard. That's one. And you're not necessarily requiring the training. Say this is a requirement that you must do it. So those are the things I've gotten from attorneys. I know it's a lot of discussion out there, but I will go back to that front line, the bottom line. And I think it's very, very important that you get a consistent training message to the people that are ultimately delivering on what your brand standards are.
I agree, and that's how you protect your brand, and that's why people are buying into a franchise system, is for that assistance and that help. They don't want to do it on their own, so I like that training to the brand standard. So speaking of requirements, that was a good segue. We're not requiring the training. Do you guys require ongoing training for your more tenured franchisees in your system? And we're going to pop up a poll question to the audience to make sure that they're still awake. We have about 4 minutes left before I go to questions. So if you have questions for Jerry, Ryan, or Cordell, get those in and we'll ask them as well. But as you guys answer this question, I want to know, and Ryan, I'll start with you. Do you have any training requirements or for the franchisees that have been in your system a longer period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. People have to complete the initial training, including that training week. They have to pass that. There's a series of assessments. However, after that point, I will say no, there is no required training past that point necessarily. So it's not like there's an annual assessment that you must pass in order to continue being an accredited franchisee of ours, for example. However, it is something we're thinking about, and if we do roll it out, this goes back to something Cordell was saying, we will tie it to people's self-interest. It would be something that we probably would never strictly contractually require, but we could certainly incentivize, hey, why don't you get assessed on this new technology we've rolled out, and if you pass your assessment, we'll reward you with the following. And that might be, $300,000, might just be a matter of, accolades publicly, who knows. But we're really not the type of franchisor that wants to have strict requirements on people. to necessarily complete things every single year or so. Yeah, honestly.
Great. No, that's good. Jerry, how about you?
Yeah, about the same as Ryan. We don't contractually have that except for upon renewal. So if we're going to renew an agreement, they have to come back for training. It's kind of like getting people to do their financials, and if you haven't done it, and we look at this as our training. Just to answer, we call it our vision groups, which is our version of peer groups. Because we tie it to their vision plan, but we graduated that from 100 level, 200 level, 300, 400, and then ultimately the 500 level, which gets into wealth management and everything else. But what we are trying to do, our main is getting them to want to do the training, and that could be more about unit level economics. It could be about business management, where they're going to go, and operationally, we're pretty engaged on that. Again, we got boots on the ground and do that, but I think getting them to want to continue their ongoing training and coaching and lead them in that direction is more important to us right now.
Great. Cordell, are you seeing any different training programs for your clients based on trying to get at those older franchisees that think that they might know everything there is to know about the brand and how to deliver that brand standard?
No, Michelle, I think Jerry and Ryan covered it pretty well, and I'm not seeing things that are substantially different from what they touched on. Certainly making the training available, trying to pull people into it, talking about the value and the benefit of it. Certainly continue to see that. Having things written into your contract that talks about training can be required. I've seen that. I wouldn't say I see a lot of it, but kind of think what Jerry and Ryan touched on is what I'm seeing it here for the most part out there.
Great. And then the last topic that I have here before I turn it back over to questions, we talked about measuring competencies through training, and I think Jerry and Ryan talked about that, where they do it on that initial side. Cordell, I don't think I gave you a chance to kind of weigh in on measuring the competencies through initial or ongoing training, if you have anything that you want to share as far as how do you capture their knowledge or hold them accountable to that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Michelle. So I'll get somewhat academic on this. I mean, when you think about measuring training, there are 4 levels of evaluation. It's Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. Level 1 is, did they like it? That's typically your smile sheet. You can certainly do that in initial training, conference, convention, e-learning. So level 1 is, did they like it? Level 2 is, did they get it? And that's typically done with some type of test, a test at the end of a lesson, test at doing initial training. So did they get it? Level 3 is where we tend to see people kind of slip a little bit and not go as far with it. But level 3 is, can they do it? And typically the way that we see that is through some type of observation. So we taught you how to do this. We tested you on it. Now we're going to put you into a test store. We're going to put you into a situation, and we're actually going to see if you can actually do it. And that's typically done through observation. Excuse me. The biggest one, though, is level 4, which is measuring ROI, return on investment. So training should be objective focused. Again, we're trying to move this metric. We're trying to make this change. So are we seeing training have this impact? So are we looking at the ROI connection? So one way that I've seen this done is looking at people that take training. So if you have an LMS, you have a system that allows you to track who took the training. Go back and measure the performance results if you're looking to affect same-store sales. So look at those that took training versus those that didn't, and look at the sales correlation. Was it a greater increase from those that took the training? Look at net promoter scores. Was there a bigger net promoter score increase from those that took the training? And try to draw that correlation. So the biggest one is ROI, so return on investment. So those are kind of the 4 things that we think about. Really focus on trying to get to level 4 is a big message I would share with people as you're thinking about what do I do with these 4 levels of evaluation as it relates to training.
Great. And Jerry or Ryan, I don't know if you want to add anything beyond what we talked about kind of early on how you assess them after that initial phase, or if you're good on that.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm pretty
All
good
right.
too. I also use the Kirkpatrick model for tracking and sort of establishing those levels and making sure people are competent.
Good. I know we have a few questions. I'm going to turn it over to Mike to grab those as we wrap things up. I just want to thank you guys all for your time today. I think you gave some great examples and shared a lot, and I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I have a few questions to get to, and if anybody has any others that they want to ask the panel, please get them in now. We have a few minutes left to try to get through these. I'm going to start with Jerry, and I'm going to go back to your certified trainer program. There was a question asking whether you have any specific requirements for somebody to be a certified trainer, whether that's in terms of tenure or performance or anything like that. Is there anything that you require of those?
You know, probably performance to their engagement. You know, they got to be engaged in the fleet as we measure it across our office-wide business system, and level of sales and financial achievement. Yes.
All right, great, thank you. Ryan, I'm going to jump over to you. I have a question going back to, you had mentioned personalized support as being something that you try to offer. So the question is, what level of personalization do you aim for, and how do you determine the limits to what can be personalized in the training?
The only amount of limits that really can apply are your resources. That's really all it boils down to. You should personalize as much as you possibly can with the resources you have. So it's not like there's a set limit where I'd say, oh, you should stop personalizing at this point. No, if you actually could, I would train people individually, one-on-one, exactly how they need. I think that level of personalization is always going to be superior to the next level down, and so on and so forth. It's really just a matter of what can you practically do. Right now, for my organization, when I train franchisees here at Maypro, it's 2 franchisees at a time, and that's generally 4 to 6 people max. I've done it a couple of times where, I've done it a dozen times probably with, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people at the same time. But at that point, it's really becoming less and less personal and less effective unless you have additional trainers in the room working with you to maintain that quality. So it's really just a factor of there is no limit to how much you can personalize it. Personalizing it more equals more effective training for sure. It's just a matter of what can you actually do practically speaking.
Right. Okay. No, that's great. Cordell, I'm gonna move over to you, and I'm gonna give you an opportunity if there's anything that you want to add to that question and that discussion, and also mix in another one of, do you have any experience with gamifying training or modules for franchisees?
Yeah, so that's huge, Michael, and thank you for bringing that up. I'm not sure where that question came from, but that's certainly one of the ways to pull people into training and make sure that they want to do it. So gamification is huge. So there are a couple of things that people really need to be thinking about. Obviously, this goes into the technology or the e-learning types of training. So people learn by doing. When we build training, there's a process we use called the VAC attack. V stands for visual, we want people to see something. A stands for auditory, you want people to hear something. Probably most important is the K, the kinesthetics. You actually get people involved and allow them to do something. So that's the gamification piece, where they're actually doing certain things in a gameplay format. So that's one piece. The other thing that I was going to share with it too is this adds an element of fun to it. I'm a big believer that training can and should be fun when you have the opportunity to do it. So gamification adds that component to it as well. So great question. I'm glad it came up, and those are kind of the big things that we see as it relates to that. Completely agree with everything Ryan touched on about personalization. The only add-on that I would say to it is when you personalize it, thinking about it from a role perspective inside of your organization, there's a process we use called a DACUM, which stands for Design a Curriculum. It really looks at the role inside of your franchise system and says, here are the things that this person needs to do in order to effectively do this role. So when somebody at a certain role inside of your system goes in, there's a well thought out structured curriculum that walks him or her through what they need to do in order to effectively do that role. But great points, though.
All right. Thank you very much, Cordell. Jerry, I'm going to come over to you. We have actually another question related to the Certified Trainer Program, and that is, aside from the initial incentive to be part of the program, is there an ongoing incentive to continue as a mentor after the first year?
We've just been really coming up on our first year anniversary, so we haven't thought that through. We're still developing that. But I'll go back to what we've seen. At first we thought we were just going to get these people in, convince them to do it because we were going to pay them and do it. But seeing how much they enjoy it and everything else, I mean, they got people lining up. We want to go out. We want to go out. When's our next trip? I don't see them going away. And quite frankly, I think the money's secondary to them. I think they just enjoy being involved in the way that they are. So I don't see a need for that yet. I am looking at, how do I compensate them or, for that mentor role that just seems to be developing naturally. I've talked to 3 or 4 of the major ones we have to go out a lot, and they're not interested. They just say, we just love doing it. And, if it gets a problem, we'll let you know. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's something that you've not quite figured out yet, that's all we can offer. And actually, one last follow-up question for you, Jerry, and we're going to wrap it up on this one because we're right at the 90-minute mark here. Is your level 500 training on wealth management done by a corporate staff member or an outside professional?
Both. We have a board of advisors that serves on our company for our company. So the CEO and one of our board of advisors, that's all the board of advisors. He has an outside company that structures people with wealth management, selling company mergers, and then he and the CEO and host when they graduate to that, and then I take over and have that 500 level peer group, vision group that I facilitate.
All right. Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you again to our panelists for a great discussion today, and thank you to the whole audience for sticking with us through this series, and we hope you got a lot of value out of it. So thank you, gentlemen, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Take care, all.